What's up, everybody? It is Marcus with Marcus Talk Sports, and today I got my guy Jerm, one half of the crew over there at Stuff About Sports, joining me on the show today because this week apparently Kendrick Perkins thought it'd be a good idea to go on national TV and say that Nikola Jokic is already a top 20 player in NBA history. He's knocking on the door of being the fifth greatest center of all time, and Marcus Morris in what was probably the most egregious run of takes we've ever seen NBA players give on First Take, said that he doesn't think that Nikola Jokic is a top 20 player. There's only one person I think that is appropriate to debate this topic with, and that is Mr. Jerm Edwards. So what's up, man? How you doing?
Man, not too bad, man. Until Marcus Morris or Markeith, whichever one it is. Shout out to them, Philly legends. But he's on a Ryan Hollins type run with the bad takes. It's bad. It's real bad.
Sure. So let's just get this out of the way. Let's just cut right to the chase, right? Do you think Nikola Jokic is a top 20 player in NBA history?
Oh, I think he's firmly a top 20 player or talent, whatever verbiage you want to need. I mean, and if you don't want to put him in the top 10, I'm not going to argue really against you because it's hard to take out somebody. But if he's not 10, he's 11 or 12. Like, I can't go higher than that. The things that he has accomplished outside of winning, because I'm not a big rings equals success guy. There's plenty. Like, we don't give Robert Horry credit for having 7 rings. You know what I mean? Like, we take things at value. And winning is, to me, a team stat. Yes, in basketball, it matters a little bit more than in football, because in football, obviously, you don't play both sides of the ball. And in basketball, one player can make the difference. But at the end of the day, it's still a team thing. It doesn't matter how good one singular player is. If your team lets you down, it's hard to win 4 out of 7 games by yourself. But, I mean, most triple doubles in playoff histories, Nikola Jokic has that. His points, like, there's one of 4 players that have 10,000 plus points, 5,000 assists, and 5,000 rebounds. It's LeBron, Oscar, Larry Bird, Nikola Jokic. And Nikola Jokic, again, is 9 years in the league. So how can you say, and well, this would be his 10th year, right? So, like, to say that he's not a top 20 player when he's top 5 in mostly everything. The only player recently to have a 30, 20, and 20 game, and then he just had a 60-point triple-double. Nobody at his position has been more efficient, has been contributing to his team's success, because the Denver Nuggets aren't a stacked team. They're a bunch of rejects for the most part, right? It's Aaron Gordon resurrected from Orlando, Michael Porter Jr., who was considered a bust largely until Jokic got there. You had Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The guy is shunned out of L.A. because he's turning these guys. And Jamal Murray, who, I mean, nothing against Jamal Murray, but nobody's like listing him in the higher ranks of NBA point guards. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to name a couple of guys, a lot of guys, before you get to Jamal Murray's name. So Jokic is indeed doing what a franchise player does. And when we look at some of the other all-time greats, we can at least attribute at least one other all-time great player. In the case of LeBron, several. Jordan has Pippen, right? Like, in terms of the top 50 or all-star type level players. And I don't know, man, like, to say that he's not top 20 to me is hate. If you looked at everything that Jokic has accomplished in terms of individual stats, if this was Giannis doing it, I think people would say easily he's a top 20 player. So the fact that we're not doing that for Jokic, I don't know if it's because his game's not sexy. It's weird to watch, right? Like, he's a giant skyscraper. He doesn't look for foul calls. He's physical. He shoots. Like, tell me what he can't do. He's a great passer. He's a great shooter. He's a great facilitator. His basketball IQ is top notch. Put him against anybody else. To me, it's nonsense, and it's honestly hate to say that he's not top 20 so flippantly like Marcus Morris did.
I don't think Jokic is definitively one of the 20th greatest players of all time, right? I think if you go down the list, for me, the earliest the highest he would possibly go on my list probably is 16, right? And I can make really, really strong arguments to say he's at best 18. I don't think he's definitively, though, one of the 20th greatest players the league has ever seen. I think that's the thing, right? Like, taking nothing away from what he's done, because what he's done is incredible, right? But we got to remember also, like, who the other guys in this conversation is, right? I think, and I was talking to my friend about this the other day, what happens is, usually when we have these conversations, it's always, who's your top 10, who's your top 10, who's your top 5, who's your top 3, go, whatever. We don't actually no one really sits down and thinks about who's actually in that grouping of 11 through 20, right? Like, those names we don't talk about those names all the time, right? So you think about the top 10, obviously, and I'm not going to say them in order, but you're thinking about, Jordan, LeBron, Kareem, you're thinking about Magic, Larry, Kobe, Shaq. Some people have Wilt in their top 10. Some people have Tim Duncan in their top 10. Some people might even have Bill Russell in their top 10. I know that Steph Curry's top 10 case has gained some traction as of late. He's not in my top 10 all the time, but like, he's in that conversation, right? But when you're talking about 11 through 20, we're talking about guys like Kevin Durant. You're talking about guys like Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Oscar Robertson. Who else would you put in that conversation? Dirk Nowitzki's probably in that conversation somewhere as well, right?
Dr. J. There's a bunch, right? There's a bunch.
Right. Giannis, 4 years ago, we were starting to put Giannis into that grouping of, not like after he won that championship, he's, in that conversation. He might finish as the greatest power forward of all time. He's obviously slowed down a little bit for various reasons, but like, I feel like we're forgetting who's in the 11 to 20 conversation to just say so emphatically, oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, Nikola Jokic is a top 20 player all the time. Even if you peek down and go into like who you might have in like 21 to 25, you're still talking about players like a Kevin Garnett or a Moses Malone or an Elgin Baylor and Allen Iverson, maybe even a John Stockton. Right now, some of those guys I would put Jokic ahead of. I love AI. I think Jokic is ahead of AI all the time. I think he's ahead of Stockton all the time, right? I think he's ahead of Elgin Baylor all the time, right? But and I didn't really think about this until I actually did the research and started looking at it. Are we absolutely 100% sure that Nikola Jokic is greater all time than Moses Malone? They have the exact same resume. They're both 3-time MVPs with a championship, right? Moses Malone's one of the greatest rebounders of all time. He's a really great scorer as well if you look at his numbers. Now, to your point, no one is as efficient as Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic has the highest player efficiency rating ever. It's like 28 and a half or something like that. He also has the highest
box plus minus.
He has the highest box plus minus, and I think he has the highest offensive rating as well. Like so from the efficiency standpoint, I absolutely understand it. But I think what's happened is, and because we don't talk about the 11 through 20 guys, I think that's why people are so flippantly saying, oh, easily without a shadow of a doubt, Jokic is in top 20. If we sit down and, like I said, run through all those names, how many of those guys definitively are you putting Jokic ahead of, right? There's like, you're not putting definitively Jokic ahead of a lot of those guys. Again, argument for it? Absolutely. I'll say he has an argument for it because he has the resume to back it up. But is he definitively one of the 20th greatest players in NBA history right now? No. I think he will be when he's done. I don't think it's a definite right now. I think there's still some things I think there's still some things he needs to check off. I think there's still some things he needs to do when you're talking about the 20 greatest players in the history of the sport.
So, I look at, let's break it down, maybe not players, but let's look at centers, right? I think universally, whether you agree or not, I think generally, and I think you'll agree with me, that it's Wilt, Bill, and Kareem, top 3 centers. After that, it's probably Shaq and Hakeem. I'm telling you right now, I think Jokic has passed Hakeem. I also think
I can't go there with you, bro.
I can't go
there with you.
Because, again, titles, but then just individual stats. I mean, this guy's the fastest player to like 8,000 points. He broke Larry Bird's record. This season, I know we're talking about all time, but this season, we already said, only player to have a 30, 20, and 20 triple-double. This season, he's second in assists per game. He's third in points per game. He's third in rebounds per game. And he's second in steals per game. No other player has been in the top 10 in 3 of those categories. And he's top 3 in 4 of the categories. So to sit there and deny that is insane. Nobody's finished in top 10 in all 4 of those categories. And Jokic, is about to finish top 3 is the stat I'm just reading.
Right.
It's the top 20 players we're rewarding because we don't want to disrespect the old guard without realistically saying, like, let's be real when it comes to Shaquille O'Neal. he was easily the most dominant force. But if you're building a team, you'd probably rather have Jokic as your center because he can do more for you.
It depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, and
Like,
again, this is why it's hard to do, because you're crossing eras, right? Like Shaq game was tailored for that era. Would he be as dominant now? I don't know. Giannis would, he made a joke saying Giannis would average 250 points in the 70s. Probably, you know what I mean? Like but that's the way the game is played. And the reason why I'm giving Jokic, if we're changing the sliders on these things, he's doing it in the era which I believe is the greatest era of accumulation of basketball talent we have ever seen. Like, there are guys, back in the day, you couldn't go to 9, 10, 11 on the bench, and teams are doing that regularly with players that actually contribute. There's always seems to be that guy that nobody knows that is, and teams are going deeper. Like, they're learning that you're not going to rely. Now, some teams do, like Tom Thibodeau still runs his players into the ground, old school style, but a lot of the new age coaches are running either platoon units or they're going deeper to the bench. They're valuing athleticism. And in the league's most athletic era, Jokic, who is the league's best player, is easily the most unathletic best player of anything we've ever seen. Like, this guy, again, I'm not saying it's equivalent, but his accomplishments as a player, to me, are comparable to what Patrick Mahomes has done in the NFL. We've never seen somebody rise up so fast out of nowhere and put up all-time great numbers like Nikola Jokic has done. Again, Giannis is a good example, but that was more of a shooting star. That happened for 2 or 3 seasons, and then that's about it. Giannis, he's still living off of those MVP years, but he hasn't been the same player, whether that's injuries, whether that's Doc Rivers messing up the coaching system. I don't know what's happening to Giannis in terms of his trajectory. I think people just remember how he started and where he ended up, and he's just been coasting on that. Jokic continues to get better and go, year 10 or whatever year it is right now. And he's already in the top 5 in a lot of these stats that we start adding up when we start ranking greatness. So, top 20, I mean, I'm telling you, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know the 20 best players ever, but if I'm going by centers, like, he's already, if not in the top 5, he's number 6. And again, I'm putting him past Hakeem. And when it comes to where he ranks or where his place in history, he's doing it unlike any other player we've seen before. And so I don't know, man, like, to easily say that he's not a top 20 player, I feel like you can't do that. Just like you said, you can't easily say he is. I feel like you easily can't say he's not. Like, tell me who would you rather have all time than him? Karl Malone. I'd rather have Jokic than Karl Malone. Karl Malone was great, but
I'd rather have Jokic than Karl Malone. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
But Karl Malone is recognized as whatever, top 50.
But if someone walked up to me and says Karl Malone's a top 20 player of all time, though, when you look at what he has compared to what Jokic has, I mean, we're talking about a guy who, crappy human being aside, when he retired, he was the second all-time leading scorer in the league at the time when he retired. He has an MVP or 2, I think, no championships, obviously, because he had to, he ran into Jordan twice. But, like, when you look at Karl Malone, you look at like the body of work that he has. I think that if someone says, Karl Malone's top 20, that's not crazy. So here's my thing, right? This is my thing with the Jokic Hakeem thing. And I'll be honest, it's my same thing with, like, I was having this conversation the other day with about Steph, because my friend said it's egregious. I don't think Steph's a top 10 player of all time. I think Steph's fantastic. I think Steph is like 11th or 12th on my list. I think somewhere around there. Before Nikola Jokic showed up, who was universally recognized as the most skilled center in the history of the sport?
Probably Hakeem or Kareem.
It was Hakeem, right? Yeah. So I understand that Jokic is that now, and he's earned that. But Jokic is that now, and we say that about Jokic because Jokic is doing things offensively that we've never seen a player at the position do, right? The ability, the facilitating and the ability to run the offense. And like you said, depending on how you want to put a team together, you can get away with, let's say, not having a true point guard in the lineup because Jokic can do that facilitating, right? And so to that, he deserves the credit. But Jokic can't hold a candle to Hakeem's footwork what Hakeem brings defensively, right? Like that's the other component of it as well.
Yeah,
and so if you ask me to list the top 5, that's why I'm going to say for me, and I think the other thing too is I think what happens a lot of time when we talk about greatness is we conflate 2 different conversations, right? There's a difference between being greater than somebody and being better than somebody, right? As far as like being better at the game. Now, more often than not, the better player is usually greater, but that's not always the case. So who's better at basketball? Maybe you want to say that's Nikola Jokic. Maybe, and you could. But I would say that Hakeem Olajuwon is better at basketball than Nikola Jokic because he does it on both sides of the floor. Hakeem is like I think for his career average, like 22 and 11. Like he wasn't a scrub offensively. Again, obviously not passing and facilitating the way that Jokic does, but Hakeem did it on both sides of the floor. He's the all-time leader in blocks, I believe. He's a 2-time defensive player of the year. I think he has 2 MVPs as well. He's won 2 championships. So on both sides of the ball, that's why for me, in order for Jokic to pass Hakeem, that's when the rings and the other accolades come into play at that point.
Right.
Like he would have to have a better resume than Hakeem Olajuwon for me to say, okay, he's the 5th greatest center of all time. Because as far as skill and talent, yeah, there's things that Jokic does that Hakeem doesn't do. There's absolutely things that Hakeem was able to do that we just haven't seen from Jokic. And I think you can take that conversation to the same. It's the same thing with Magic and Steph for me, right? Magic's the greatest point guard of all time. That's not a knock on Steph, but he is. And yeah, Steph's the greatest shooter that God ever created. And that is something that Magic doesn't have under his belt. But Magic's also the best passer in the history of the sport, right? It doesn't lead to all-time in assists, obviously that's Stockton, but still there are things that Magic can do Steph couldn't do on both sides of the ball. Magic wasn't a great defender, but if you ask me who I'd rather have on defense, I'd rather have Magic Johnson as a defender over Steph Curry. And so those things matter, right? Yeah. It's about totality. So I think what's happened is people are conflating being greater than someone with being better than someone. Those are two completely different conversations.
Oh, yeah, because Allen Iverson's the greatest to me. Yeah, Allen Iverson's the greatest player.
You know what I mean? If you want to, I got people on TikTok telling me that Jokic is already greater at basketball than Kevin Durant. I'm like, bro, I understand it's really easy to pick on KD because he left OKC to go to the Warriors and win those 2 chips. And I had someone tell me that those 2 rings have asterisks, and that's really lazy.
That's insane.
It's really lazy.
He was the best player on the best team in the league. That's
my thing with Kevin Durant. If you want to say that the argument that those 2 rings in 17 and 18 have an asterisk would be much stronger if KD was carried to those 2 championships.
For sure.
Kevin Durant was the best player on that team
all year too, not just in the playoffs.
In 2019, if he doesn't get hurt, he would have won a 3rd Finals MVP when they won the championship. That's how good Kevin Durant is. And I think that we've forgotten because it's so easy to pick apart that section of his career and then obviously look at how things obviously haven't gone his way since then. But if we want to start throwing around asterisks, then technically Hakeem's 2 rings in 2020 in the 90s deserve an asterisk because Jordan wasn't playing basketball, right? We should give an asterisk then to the 2015 Warriors because they beat the Cavs team when the Cavs were dealing with injury, right? Yep. We should give an asterisk to the 2019 Raptors because KD got hurt and Clay was out, right? Yep. If we want to start throwing around asterisks, there's a lot of asterisks that can go around. It's not, I had someone say to me, he goes, if the Warriors don't win those championships with Kevin Durant, then they're a joke or they should be relegated to the G League or whatever. I'm like, well, I don't know about that because this is the same team that in 2015 won or the 15-16 season, 73 games, blew a 3-1 lead. So you mean to tell me that obviously them getting Kevin Durant is what sent them over the top. But if they don't get KD, it's not a foregone conclusion that the Warriors are going to win those 2 championships without him. Let's not just assume that, the narrative is Golden State saved Kevin Durant's legacy. I mean, we can say that, but let's not act like Kevin Durant didn't also, in a way, save Steph Curry's legacy as well. We wouldn't be having these ridiculous conversations about whether or not Steph is the face of the generation or whether or not Steph's top 10, if not for those 2 championships when he wasn't the bus driver, as Charles Barkley likes to say. So again, greatness is one thing. Being better at the game of basketball is a whole different conversation. And like you always like to say, there's a bit of nitpicking that has to be involved because you are talking about the best of the best.
Yeah.
right?
Once you
And
get
so
to the
have
1%,
Yeah,
Once
like
get
you
up
have
to
to
the
be like,
top
oh, this guy
1%,
has 3 rings and this only has 2. And it's like, I mean, that's fair, but like you do have to nitpick. But again, going back to the centers, for me, it's Kareem, Shaq, Wilt, Hakeem, and you and I talked about on the phone the other day. You kind of have to have Bill Russell in that as well, just off of the historical value. No one's ever going to win 11 championships ever in any sport, at least any team sport, rather. Like that's
you can't punish guys for what era they play in.
Like you can't. And on top of that, he has 11 rings in the same era where Wilt only has 2.
Right.
So like that, and so if we want to show Wilt the love, we can't not then show Bill Russell that same love. In order for Jokic to get into the top 5 for me, he would have to have a better resume than Hakeem Olajuwon. That's the only way. Because I value being able to play on both sides of the ball. And Jokic, not a scrub defensively, but he's not near the defense. He's not near the caliber of defender that any of those other 5 guys are at the center position.
I'm not disagreeing with you. My only pushback is he is so elite offensively that what he does defensively to me doesn't matter, especially when, again, I just mentioned he's top 3 in rebounds this season. You know what I mean? He's top, it's so he's doing what he has to do. And with the exception of one of Hakeem's rings and one of Duncan's, every single one of the rings won by guys who we consider in the top 10 had been won with an all NBA teammate. I mentioned that earlier. If Jokic wins another, he'd be the only guy in history to have 2 rings without an all NBA counterpart or co-star. So
assuming
to me,
they don't go get one, right?
Right. Assuming they don't get one. Let's say they win it. Let's say they win it this year, right? Like, that's enough to place him there. And I mentioned, I'm not arguing for him to be top 5 or anything. I'm just saying, I think he's easily top 10 right now. If you wanted to place him 11 or 12, to me, that's way more fair. He's closer to the top 10 than to the top 20, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I know that we're only talking about 4 or 5 players, but like the argument to put him in the top 10 is a lot easier to me than to keep him out of the top 20. Because to me, what he has accomplished individually warrants top 20. Like he's doing things that, like when ESPN is pulling up Jokic versus Michael Jordan efficiency stats, and you're telling me he's not a top 20 player is wild. Sorry. Again, I'm with you. Like it's hard. Like it's hard to because you have to boot somebody out. But to me, it's one of those things where you can't ignore the greatness we're seeing at the expense of the past that we had witnessed. You know what I mean? So like I have to give this man his flowers. Like he's doing it in a way that we want players to do it, right? You want to talk about asterisks? LeBron James, basically all his rings have asterisks, right? Like there's a funny graphic that goes to like the rings that you go with the team that drafted you, and LeBron James isn't on the list because people got to remember he left Cleveland. They manufactured the team, right? They drafted Kyrie Irving instead, and they had to bring in Kevin Love, who was a top 10 player at the time, you know, and then you bring LeBron. So he technically didn't win it with the Cavs team that drafted him. They had to build that team back up from not draft, but free agency basically. And then that's when they had the ridiculous Derrick Rose, you know what I mean? Not Shaquille O'Neal, that was the first time around, but like the Derrick Rose,
Jay Crowder,
Dwayne Wade, Jay Crowder, like they had a monster roster. And it just, when you put too much talent on a team in basketball, it just rarely works out. Which is a testament to the Warriors and Kevin Durant. It's hard to make that really work. But for Jokic, he's never had that. Never had that. And so now if Luka went to the Nuggets, then we'd be talking about him a little differently. But the fact that Jokic has, for the most part, literally been doing it by himself, more so than any other player in the NBA, is crazy. Like, again, to me, he's past David Robinson. To me, he's past Patrick Ewing. Like when you start getting into those conversations, to say he's not top 20 to me feels a little. It's like a forced argument. Like, you know what I mean? Like you want to keep him out of the top 20, but based on what? Explain to me why he's not a top 20. That's what Marcus Morris didn't do, and all he did was deflect on other players. No, tell me why you don't think Jokic is top 20. Because if you can make a good argument for me, I'm not against it. I'm not so into like Jokic being top 20 that I can't be talked out of it. But when you look at his numbers and you look at what he's accomplished in the short time he's been in the league, it's a hard sell for me personally.
So, all right, I'm gonna try. I don't, because like I said, no one ever does 11 through 20. I put together my top 20 from top to bottom, and I think I have Jokic somewhere, like I said, in like 16 to the end.
Okay.
So here we go. So LeBron's my GOAT, which I know that you don't like that, but whatever.
Oh, this list is I can't do it.
So I have LeBron, Jordan, Kareem. Those are my top three definitively. I think universally everyone would agree, no matter the order, those are the three greatest players of all time. 100%.
Gotcha.
Okay. Number 4 is Magic Johnson. Okay. Number 5, I have Tim Duncan in the top 5. And the reason why I have Tim Duncan in the top 5 is because number 1, he's the greatest power forward of all time. But more importantly than that, for all the Jordan people out there, and it's not everybody. I know that it's not every single person, but there is a large contingent of Jordan fans who say, why is Jordan the GOAT? And they say he's 6-0 in the finals. If it weren't for Ray Allen in 2013, Tim Duncan would also be 6-0 in the finals. Mm-hmm. And so that warrants him being in that, like he's there. That warrants him being in that discussion. So that's my top 5. LeBron, MJ, Kareem, Magic, and Tim Duncan. 6 is Larry Bird. And I'll tell you why. For a long time, like I respected Larry Bird for who he is and his attachment to Magic Johnson, but it wasn't until I started like really getting on TikTok. There's a guy, we call him OG. I think his name is like Chilltown Hoops or something. He's like this massive Bird fan. And he's like the person that like put me on to Larry Bird. And like when I sit down, like I watch, I'm like, this like the greatest white man ever played basketball is Larry Bird, bro. Like, you got to give Larry Bird some respect. So I have Larry Bird at 6, Kobe 7, Shaq is 8. I think the only reason why I would put Kobe over Shaq is because Kobe won 2 rings without Shaq. Shaq only won 1. If they both had the same number of rings, personally, I would put Shaq ahead of Kobe. Just because Shaq at one point in time was the most dominant player in the league, and he is the most dominant player of all time. He just doesn't have the extremely long prime to show for the way that other people do. Right. So then we get into 9 and or that was what was that? That was 8 and 9, or that was 7 and 8. So now we get to number 10. The 10th greatest player of all time to me is Hakeem. Hakeem is my number 10, and I have Steph at number 11. And the reason why I have Steph at number 11 is because I value what Hakeem does on both sides of the basketball. Like that you can't. I understand who Steph is as a basketball player, but I can't negate the greatness that is Hakeem Olajuwon on both sides of the ball. So my top 10 is LeBron, MJ, Kareem, Magic, Tim Duncan, Larry Bird, Kobe, Shaq, Hakeem Olajuwon. And then we get into, I'm sorry. I have Wilt, then Hakeem, then Steph. So a Steph is actually 12, not 11. There we go. Okay. So now we get into that next part that I'm telling you about. This is where I think people forget. Kevin Durant's the 12th greatest player of all time. He's right behind Steph. I think just out of respect for the fact that Steph has 2 rings and because people keep saying that KD doesn't win those rings without Steph, whatever. I have Kevin Durant at number 12. And then we get into the Oscar Robertsons, the Derek Nowitzkis, Charles Barkley's, Karl Malone's, those guys. That's the group where I think now you're splitting hairs. That's the group where Jokic fits in, is when you start talking about Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Dirk Nowitzki, Oscar Robertson, those guys, Moses Malone, Kevin Garnett, like that collection of NBA players, that's where Jokic falls. And so if you were to take Jokic ahead of any of those guys, I won't get mad at you. So I would say, but firmly though, I think there are 15 guys that are definitively ahead of him. Like I was saying earlier, there's 15 that are definitively ahead of him. Once you get to 16 and below, you can throw them in there. I won't get mad at you. Me personally though, and this is the last thing I'll say on it, because I do think that this matters. Nikola Jokic's prime is obviously one of the greatest primes we've ever seen. It's not a very long one, but it's shaping up to be one of the greatest primes we've ever seen. I'd like to see Nikola Jokic win another championship.
Yeah.
I would like to see that. I think that's really the thing, because I think
he would need to. He would absolutely have to be in the top 10 if you wanted to argue it. Right.
So here's the thing, because at this point, and I don't want to go on a bit of a tangent, but I kind of do. At this point, there gets to a point where at some point when the accolades stop coming in, the numbers are going to be the numbers, just for how long you play. right? If you maintain a certain level if you maintain playing at a certain level, your numbers are going to inflate themselves. So when we're talking about him being, in, these groups where he's got 10,000 points and five, like that's great. And I'm not trying to knock that, but that comes when you're in your prime and you're doing it consistently, right? When I look at a guy like Nikola Jokic and I say, okay, if Nikola Jokic plays for 10 more years and all he has are 3 MVPs and 1 championship, would that be enough to definitively put him in the top 20 at that point? Then,
because
to the people who don't think he's in the top 20 right now, he plays for 10 more years, no more accolades, no more championships. I think what's happened is we've gotten to this point now where everything's about rings, because that's what so many people have reduced the GOAT conversation to, is rings. Where it almost feels like in order for anyone to legitimately, or in order for there to be an overwhelming consensus of your greatness, as far as that pantheon, when you're starting to get nitpicky, you have to have at least 2.
Yeah, the rings are more important than MVPs to me because Kobe only has 1 MVP. Now, whether that's deserved, you know what I mean? So like,
but he has 5 rings.
But he has 5 rings. So yes, Jokic. So like, so if Jokic gets another ring, he's a 2-time champion, 3-time MVP. Probably should have been a 4-time MVP. Might be, or and he's probably going to be MVP this year. Hey, that's what I was going to say. He's because I'm projecting the future, but if you're counting the Joel Embiid, which I do think Embiid did deserve MVP, but I wouldn't have been mad if Jokic also would have won it either. Yeah. But so you're talking about a guy who probably should have at least 4. Probably is going to get it, or 5. Either way, he's going to get another MVP at some point, and then 2 rings on top of where he ranks in terms of statistics. Yeah, man. Like you have to put him at least in the top 20 definitive. And I think a ring does stamp it, but you could make the argument now without the ring and without the MVP based on his statistical value. Like, again, you're talking now you have KD and Steph above him. I don't. I think Jokic has surpassed them. Hell, KD literally called him a top 10 player just the other day when they were after that ridiculous triple-double he had. Now, KD's a media guy. KD doesn't strike me as a guy who just says things. He probably truly believes that. But again, give me the guys who you do what Jokic is able to do, because here's the other problem in the arguments we have, and I'm not saying you're doing that, and I think I'm guilty of this at times when it comes to other sports, is Jokic isn't done playing. So we're taking the finality of some of these guys, right, and then not the path, right? There's nothing to indicate that Jokic is going to get worse, so I can only assume he's going to continue until he hits the wall. That like next year he's isn't going to just fall off the cliff, and so I have to assume he's going to accumulate even more stats. And so I can only go by what I've seen him do so far, and I haven't seen anybody do anything like Jokic has done in the last couple years. And again, every year he just seems to do more and more great things that I haven't seen anybody else do. I love Patrick Ewing. My granddad was a Knicks fan growing up. I watched a lot of Knicks games. But Jokic is a better center. Like, again, when we talk about centers, it's Wilt, it's Bill, it's Kareem, Shaq, and then then you got the Jokic's and the Hakeems and the whoever you want to throw into the. I think Jokic has surpassed David Robinson too. But
I agree.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's that group, whoever you want to put in that group. But the mere fact, and I think my overarching point, without getting into the weeds, is that the fact that we're even putting him in those conversations warrant, and a lot of those players we named are already fringe top 20 or in the top 20 somewhere. And the fact that we are comparing Jokic to them, and that his resume does, in fact, hold up to a lot of those guys, counteracts the guy who we're listening to, who, as you were talking, I wanted to go ahead and look up Marcus Morris's bona fides. He's a 0-time MVP, 0-time All-NBA, never led the league in points, never led the league in steals. He's a 9-time NBA trade asset. So that's the guy we're talking about, listening to when it comes to evaluating players and talking about the NBA. I just wanted to throw that out there for those, because I want to be fair to Marcus Morris and put out his statistics and things like that, so we know exactly who is making these kind of takes out there. Just to be fair to him.
9-time NBA trade asset. That's hilarious. The last thing I will say too is when you think about, I think so. Here's the other thing. A lot of people, this is probably going to give me some hot water. I don't care. There's a lot of people who, when they talk about Jokic, they say, "Oh, Jokic changed the game, the way that the game is being played." No, he hasn't.
No,
here's what I mean.
He's just done it differently. Yeah.
Here's what I mean by no, he hasn't. When you think about, I'll put it this way. When I think about people who have changed the game, you think about the immediate impact that happened. That like they started playing a certain way and then immediately something changed, right? Mm-hmm. Steph Curry bursts onto the scene. They win championship shooting the basketball, right? Yeah. From deep. The instant that happened, you can look at it. The number of threes that have been taken on average by each team every single season has increased since then. The reason why people hate three-point shooting now is because of the little light-skinned man out there in Golden State. That's changing the game. Yeah. When you think about a guy in Dirk Nowitzki, right? We've never before seen a guy before him at 6'10", almost 7 feet tall, shoot the ball from the mid-range or anywhere the way that he shoots the ball. I don't care what Karl Anthony Towns says. Dirk's the greatest shooting big man in the history of the sport, right? Then comes along a guy named Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant, you can obviously tell, heavily influenced in more ways than one by Dirk, right? Dirk is Kevin Durant is an example of the byproduct of Dirk and the way that he played basketball. But KD, even in his own way, has changed the game because no one at his position or his build, like he's also 7 feet tall, but Dirk had a little bit of weight on. He had a little bit of meat on his bones, right? And it wasn't all, it was post work and it was mid-range work and it was three levels, right? Kevin Durant's one of the most efficient scorers in the history of the game. I believe his points per game average is like third all time or something to like Jordan and Elgin Baylor, I think. Like there are there's two guys, that's it, that have averaged more points per game than Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant has also in his own way changed the game. Now we got skinny dudes like Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren at 7-something feet tall. Obviously, they're playing the center position because they're taller, but they're shooting the lights out of the basketball now when they're healthy. Jokic hasn't changed the game. He's changing it. I think in the next 3, 5, 7 years, we will start to see an emphasis more on big men who can pass out of the post and facilitate out of the post and do those things. I think that's coming. But Jokic presently today, as of April 2025, has not changed the game. We haven't seen the byproduct of the way that he plays basketball affect other teams in the league now, or even other teams in the league, in the coming years. And it just hasn't happened yet. Like Jokic is still the only guy, not the only guy. I don't want to disrespect like Domantas Sabonis or even like an Alperen Şengün, right? But Sabonis and Şengün, we say they are like variants of Jokic, right? But we were talking about Sabonis as that before Jokic had really hit his prime, right? Like Jokic hadn't hit his prime when we were talking about Sabonis in this manner. We thought Sabonis was, wow, you got a big man who can shoot, he can defend, he can score at all three levels, not so much at the 3-point, but he can, right? And he can pass out of the post. Obviously, Jokic is taking it to the next level. But since Jokic has been in his prime over these last 5 years, have we seen any other center in the league come into the league and do what Jokic is doing? Have we seen any other team make a concerted effort to go find themselves a guy that can be like Jokic? No, we haven't. I think it's coming. I think in the next couple of years we might see it. But I also think that speaks to the uniqueness of how Jokic plays basketball. Because
that's the answer.
Because when you're looking, and again, I don't watch men's college basketball for the most part, as I'm sure most people don't, because it's just not entertaining. But when you look at the bigs in men's college basketball, right? How many bigs are you looking at that are coming down the pipe and saying, well, that guy might be the next Jokic? That's not happening, right? You can identify a guy who could be the next Kevin Durant, right? There was a time when people thought Brandon Ingram would be the next KD, right? You can look at guys and be like, oh, that guy might be the next LeBron James, right? I know Colin Cowherd infamously tried to do it with Ben Simmons after one great game. Talking about some LeBron can go after one great game. Ben Simmons has been hot dog water ever since. Good job, Colin. Right? You can do it with maybe not Steph, because Steph is again on a different level, but like you can see people who are who you can find a guy who can shoot similar at that similar level, maybe not the volume, but you can find a guy at a similar level. We've yet to find someone currently in the NBA or on their way to the NBA who models that. And so I don't want to say that Jokic has changed the game, because he hasn't. He hasn't changed the game. Not yet.
But that's the argument, right? So like when you think change the game, you think the way people adapt or, revolutionize. Jokic doesn't do that. But that adds to his mystique. He cares more about horse racing than he does basketball. Nobody is changing, because we just talked about it. The Giannis template, where everybody's 7 foot tall and can dribble between the legs and takes 4 dribbles to get from one end of the court to the other. That's the style of basketball that we're evolving to. And Jokic is a throwback body, but who plays at a way we just haven't. He's a unicorn. So no, he's not changing the game because he can't, right? LeBron James didn't change the game either. You know why? Because kids aren't growing up to be 6'8", 240 pounds and can run a 4.3. That's not realistic. That's why people gravitate towards the Kobes and the Jordans and the Stephs, because everybody can do that. Technically, you know what I mean? Like you watch him as a kid and you're like, oh, he's like me. He's shaped like me. Guys like Jokic and LeBron don't exist naturally, right? They're unicorns. So like you can't really emulate their games, because what they have is unattainable. But Kobe is attainable. He wasn't anything special in terms of, you know what I mean? He just had
Kobe himself is an example of someone being attainable.
Right.
He's Jordan to a T, right? Like
he's a Jordan clone, right? And so you just have to have the mentality to do it, right? I pulled up to my son's. I used to pull up to my son's AAU games when he was a kid, and there's these little 7-year-olds pulling up from half court. Like they might as well just cut that court in half and just let them shoot from half court all the time, because that's changing the game, right? Yeah. That never used to be a thing, and that's why basketball. A lot of these old heads like myself say that basketball has gotten worse, because yes, while the athleticism has gone up, the cost of that is skill. Because now these young players are relying on their athleticism. They're not really skilled. Jokic is all skill because he's not athletic. And so, and that's why his game to some may be boring to watch, but you can't deny the skill. Like nobody's doing it like he has. And Marcus Morris, we should have started this at the top of the show. I forgot. He's just mad because Jokic bodied his brother in that Miami Heat game and set him out for the last 3 months. I just thought about that. I thought, Marcus Morris, you're a hater, man. I don't, whatever.
But I don't want to make it seem like I'm like discrediting Jokic. Obviously, what Jokic is doing is great and it's unique. But when I think about guys that have changed the game, I think about guys who you can look across the history of the league after they've entered it, and you can see, oh, there's a guy that plays like him. Right? There's a guy that does what he does or is similar or can emulate it. Right now, I don't think anyone, again, like I said about Steph, I don't think anyone will ever get to that level of shooting. Right. But the league has changed because of Steph Curry. The way that basketball is played on all levels, from the best of the best to the little 7-year-olds running around in these gyms, has changed because of the way that Steph plays basketball. We see more big men shooting because of Dirk Nowitzki. We see more 7-foot slim snipers because of Kevin Durant, right? You see you see those things. Nikola Jokic, I think, you know what? I'll say this. I will give Jokic this. Jokic has changed the way that we as consumers of basketball consume basketball. Because before Jokic, we weren't really having a bunch of arguments about value over replacement player and block box plus minus and offensive rating and like we weren't having all these arguments about advanced stats. So I will give him that, right? If we're talking about the way that the game is consumed, he did change it that way. But we're talking about the way that the game is being played. Jokic hasn't changed the way that the game is being played yet. There's no other team that models their style of play after the way that Jokic and the Nuggets play basketball. And I think, going back to the rings thing, that's because they've only won one championship. if they've, if they would have won last year, get it back to back, if they were dominating again on route to maybe a potential third, I think then you start to see that, right? But because it's just one championship, this is, I believe, we're still on pace for, unless the Celtics do it. This is the first decade, I think, last I checked, in the history of the league, or at least in a very long time, where there's been a different champion each year of the decade. 2020 was the Lakers. 2021 it was who won the championship in 2021? 2021 was the who won the chip in 2021?
Milwaukee.
Forgettable, right? 2020 was the Lakers. 2021 was Milwaukee. 2022 was the Warriors. 2023 was the Nuggets. Last year was the Celtics. It's been a long time since we've had 5 different champions to start. And so that speaks again to, clearly, there's many different ways that it can be done. And so until we get to a point where the way that Jokic's style of play is dominating the league and resulting in championships, not just one championship, but multiple championships, then I think we'll see a change in the way the game is being played. He certainly, though, changed the way that the game is being viewed. I do just want to make that distinction because I'm sure people are going to be like, oh, what is he talking about? Like, yeah, he's changed the way that we consume the game as fans and as media. But no one else out here is playing through their center. No one. There's no one else doing it. The only other team that was doing it was the Sixers, and their center can't stay healthy. And even then, Joel Embiid doesn't play the way that Nikola Jokic does. So even then, that's not really the same thing, right? There's no other team in the NBA that play and model their offensive schematics or their defensive schematics based on how the Nuggets play. And to me, that is a component of when you think about changing the game. Either you are you're directly responsible for a shift across the league. You're directly responsible for the influx of talent that's coming into the league and the way that they model their game. Jokic isn't doing either of those things. Yeah, it could change, but as of right now, through 5 years of this prime, it hasn't happened yet.